Welcome everyone to episode 6 of The Alignment Gap. And today we're joined with Parnika Sharma. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think just right off the bat, if we could just go into your background, kind of what got you interested in this space in general, kind of anything to do with you, like your story kind of leading up to this moment.
Yeah, so I graduated from Harvey Mudd College in 2019 with a degree in computer science.
Mm.
So I spent some time working as a software engineer, about 5 years before starting my master's. And it's an interesting industry to be in, especially I think during that sort of 2019 to 2023 period. There was this sense that people talked about how valuable software engineers are, but I at least had the feeling that some of what I was doing was grunt work to an extent, and also that there was a very limited amount of influence I had in any organization I was in. So if there was any concern I had about a product or a way something was designed, I only had so much push for making anything better. And so all this came to a head in 2023. ChatGPT hits the scene, and I think I come to the realization of how out of touch the rest of the world is with how tech actually works, both in terms of how the tech world works and how the technologies themselves work. So that was what sort of gave me the push to be like, okay, there need to be more people communicating between technical and non-technical people, and I'm happy to do it. So I came to Duke. I just finished my master's this December in tech ethics and science policy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think having that kind of technical background in a sense kind of elevates like your understanding of why this is such a big problem, why AI alignment is such a big problem in general in today's landscape. Just on a very broad level, first of all, what do you think is the reason why most people today just aren't informed about the potential harms that kind of arise with this technology?
I think there are a few things. There is, I think, a long-standing narrative about the way technology, the role technology plays in our lives, right? Like we're taught about technology and innovation, and we're told these stories about entrepreneurship and the ways that technology has transformed lives to make them better.
Right.
And those are all like valid stories to an extent, but the reality is that technology is a neutral tool. It can amplify harms just as much as it can create opportunities. And I think that especially we're in a phase right now where like there's a lot of hype, and I think the tech industry is really putting all of its eggs in the AI basket, because I don't know how much memory people have of this, but back in 2023, right before ChatGPT hit the scene, I remember there was discussion in the tech world about a slowdown in investment, about people beginning to see through, like not seeing as much actual output from the products of tech as they wanted them there to be. Like there weren't the efficiency outcomes. A lot of industries where the disruption effect were happening had already been disrupted to the point where there wasn't any more disruption
Right.
to pull that much cash out of it. So AI comes in. I think there's a lot of hype narrative that's pushing it. I think that because there's a lot of pressure to adopt and to show that it's like working, there are a lot of people who want it to work very badly and are pushing it very hard. And I think that um, all that aside, there's also just the effect of here is something that I'm aware of that I think a number of people who were in tech spaces were aware of, at least in terms of large language models and the ability to generate things like images and videos, like how machine learning was progressing. But the general public didn't have easy access to it. And
Right.
getting sudden easy access to it, especially for someone who doesn't have the context of all of the years of development, how it works, can seem miraculous and can seem like, oh my goodness, this is such a revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess in a sense then, what do you see in today's current age as the biggest kind of issue with artificial intelligence, whether that be AGI, whether that be job loss, data privacy questions. Like, kind of, there are so many different realms in which AI kind of amplifies these fears and these harms in a sense. What do you see as your top priority, and what do you see as kind of feasibly able to change in a sense?
Yeah. I'm very privacy focused in the work that I do and in what and how I think about things. I am I think that I understand why people are concerned about AGI and like these questions about existential risk. I think that my belief is that if there is going to be an existential risk from something like AGI, it will be because people implemented systems in such a way that it put people at risk.
Right.
Like if you give an agent access to the electric grid, right? You only have yourself to blame for giving it that sort of permission,
Yeah.
right? So I actually I'm more concerned on the privacy front, partially like it's my own personal bias, it's what I think about a lot. But I think
Hmm.
that artificial intelligence does two things. One, it enables the parsing of all of this collected data. So we've been having people collecting data for so long, and
Hmm.
there was some element of obscurity to it, right?
Right.
Like, think about even earlier discoveries about the NSA and how much of American data the NSA was collecting. Only so much of that could really be seen by agents. But
Yeah.
now you have tools that, sure, they're not perfect, but they're capable of surfacing things from large amounts of data, and that's
Right.
disturbing, especially when you think about like the civil consequences of that. And
Hmm.
on the flip side of that, I think that the current trend of artificial intelligence being really based around data, like massive amounts of data, massive amounts of compute, it basically incentivizes every company to collect as much data as possible. So I think earlier, maybe if you had laws and regulations that were more restrictive, or like even internal policies that were like, well, you can only collect something for an explicit business purpose.
Right.
Most companies can claim artificial intelligence development as a business purpose now, and that's really sad.
I think in a sense then, have we seen kind of issues with so the need for compute and the need for data? If we kind of just look at OpenAI's story and rise into kind of being this top player in the frontier AI field, a lot of their success was garnered by being able to access like tons and tons and like scraping the entire internet basically of all its data. What are the key kind of privacy considerations and harms that have kind of risen out of that, and how do you see that kind of developing in the future?
Out of OpenAI's specific, like, sort of,
OpenAI, or I guess kind of other frontier AI companies as well.
yeah, I guess I think there is like a transformation in how people that there's a real difference in the way that people understand the scope of their data being used online and the reality of it,
Right,
especially with something like ChatGPT on the market. I know that like last year, there was a whole thing where I had some law students who found out that if they asked ChatGPT questions about themselves, it would produce actual detailed results about their lives, which
right.
is not comforting, I
Yeah,
think. And I think it's like, especially as I think more and more on like, we're in an era of data brokers and such extreme data collection. You think about the number of social contracts that exist that depend on a certain amount of obscurity,
yeah,
right? Like your ability to act freely as a person, to take a certain amount of risk, to like to be able to say something that might be controversial in some space and not be
right.
harassed. That's all really dependent on your ability to maintain a certain level of obscurity and protection. And I think that a lot of these models have really eroded it. And honestly, I was mostly just talking about information there, but we haven't even gotten into the realm of deepfakes, which is
Yeah,
a whole separate privacy related issue, which is it's completely I don't know how we're going to deal with it because at this point it feels a little bit like the cat is out of the bag, and so it's like at some point what do we do? Do we get Grok to stop making certain types of images? Do we pull down the regulatory It's yeah. So
Yeah. I think the key kind of issue is that most people kind of hear the word data and kind of think of it as like, obscure, like, oh, I'm clicking this certain way or I'm spending this much time on a site. But it's that as well, which is kind of concerning because those are like very micro features and like kind of very
yeah,
specific things that you can dox. But also it's like, what type of like health issues do you have? Like what does your family look like? Like what is your
yeah,
socioeconomic status look like? I think all of these are technically all just considered data, but people don't just quite realize that they're very personal to individuals and kind of there's a bit of disconnect there, which is, I think, part of the reason why we're not seeing a huge, backlash or a huge kind of resistance against all this AI data collection in general.
yeah. And I think that people, like, it's like you said, people don't understand exactly how telling that data can be. And I think that
Right.
it feels a little bit like, frogs in boiling water. People have gotten very used to
Mhm.
conveniences and to certain types of algorithmic sorting being used on them that I
Yeah.
don't think they realize, like, the ways that it's creeping into everyday life, right? Like, because even things like you talked about, like your health conditions, your purchasing habits, all of that plays into things that are starting to come out like surveillance pricing, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I know there was that big rental company that recently had a ruling against it because it was using,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's helping price collusion between uh, apartments. And I'm like, all of that is AI powered. And I don't think
Right.
people realize the extent to which all of this data collection is feeding into an economy where they are being bled dry, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, the easiest parallel I can think of is just social media, right? It's every time, how you interact with something, what you watch, what you choose to buy, what links you choose to click on, etc. I mean, that's all just data that a company is collecting on you. And I guess social media is in its most primitive form, the first type of like artificial intelligence, the most kind of a primitive form of algorithmic sorting, right? And that it's just amplified and, we've seen that just at a huge, huge scale in the current day, which I think is a bit alarming in that sense. What are your considerations on, recently we've seen more, I guess, quote unquote autonomous agents. And I guess, so for example, we've seen like Moltbook, Claudebot, all of these different agents, and they've talked about, very personal like information about their, humans is what they would call them, on these like different sites and what like AI social media basically. Kind of, is that a precursor to the types of privacy violations that we're going to kind of see in the future, or do you think there's a very reversible nature of this?
I generally think that most things can be reversed with enough time and effort. I just think that it's going to take a lot more time to reverse any of
Right.
the technical stuff we've gotten ourselves into. I do think that it is a bit of a precursor because I think that especially people who are comfortable using these agents and giving them access to a certain number of their
Yeah.
credentials and personal information, like the thing with the agents that really gets me worried is that on top of personal information and all of the data, you're giving them all this verified personal information to them. You're also allowing them technical access to
Yeah.
parts of your machine. And I'm like, with so much of our lives now invested in our digital, like our computers, our phones, is that a risk we're taking? And this is at the same time that AI agents are being deployed for cyber attacks. Like the
Yeah.
cybersecurity space is going through a whole transformation on its own because of the new
Right.
threats that AI agents are posing. So I would be I tend to err on the side of caution, but that's
Yeah.
I'm honestly really concerned. I think that people may end up exposing more than they even think they're exposing, again,
Hmm.
because of that access that these agents have.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I think the key issue is that people just don't understand kind of how much of their lives are on, the internet or like, on a device in general. And it's crazy to think about like it's kind of so ingrained, especially for my generation and, even younger, right? It's like we've grown up with social media. Kids are now growing up with LLMs, which is, just a whole nother story altogether. But the fact that, even just 20 years ago, you would not like be trusting the internet to have like very personal information about you. And now it's so ingrained and it's so kind of, you know, entrenched into like what we believe to be normal in our everyday life that it's kind of like becoming more distant to consider that, oh, there can be a world where I don't have to have all this information. Companies like don't have to be using all my personal information for all of these things. So, yeah,
And I think it's really hard, especially because even if you come to a realization of how much information is out there about you, a
right.
lot of the time you don't have a choice,
Yeah,
right? Like, I know if I had an absolute choice tomorrow, I probably wouldn't have a cell phone that I carry around with me all the time because I'm aware that I can be basically location tracked precisely my entire life because I carry my cell phone with me.
yeah,
But practically, the world isn't built in a way that allows me to live normally without that.
right.
So it's most people, like, unless you live a really exceptional life where you have a lot of control, which most people don't, people just aren't able to keep their information safe, which is, I think it's really sad that we've constructed this in like our jobs and our society. People are just at risk.
Yeah. I mean, I think the reliance is just alarming. Yesterday it was like 8 p.m. My phone died and I was like, okay, that's fine. Like I'll just go the rest of the night without my phone. I have to go to a meeting. I don't know where the meeting is because I have no one to text me. At Duke, I'm trying to get into a building. I need my phone to open using like, the phone access and I can't get into the building. I have to ask someone to like there's just a whole lot of things where the underlying assumption is that you are like kind of like in this digital economy and you are kind of like integrated. And so kind of straying away from that becomes more and more difficult as time goes on and as we get more entrenched in a sense. I do want to ask though,
Hmm.
I think a big consideration that people have with kind of privacy, with AI and all of this is that, hey, if I'm putting something up on the internet, I'm kind of assuming that it should be allowed for the sake of, oh, someone can scrape this, someone can use this. Is that actually true? And kind of what are the implications of kind of that type of mindset?
So I guess you're asking like someone's assuming that their photo will get
Yeah,
scraped if they put it
right.
online. I mean, it's probably realistic. It's probably going to get scraped. Um, I think you can try some technical mechanisms to try to like keep your information out of someone's hands, but ultimately, like I know there are some tags you can put like please don't scrape this site, but again,
Hmm.
it is on the scraper's end whether they honor
Yeah,
those. There are some tools that have been made to try to help image scraping. Um, there's only an extent to which I think they work. Um, yeah, unfortunately, this is like, I think that it is not an unrealistic mindset to have, and I think that it's probably unavoidable for most people,
right.
which is like, I think that's where we get back into the realm of regulation and policy and what is allowed to be made, because I think
Mm,
we're currently at the stage where if I think about, okay, someone's putting their phone photo online, it's
yeah.
probably going to get scraped by large, well-funded companies that are in the mainstream that are creating products for the mainstream.
Hmm.
Therefore, someone's images might be able to be used by just about anyone,
Yeah,
including people who know them personally. I think there is an argument to be made for sure there are going to be bad actors creating technical tools at any time. A bad actor technical tool is not going to be mainstreamed. It's not going to be as accessible. It's not going to put you at as much risk. It should still be dealt with, but
right.
like if there are legal and regulatory guidelines, then you have more ability to fight back. You have more ability to be like, "Hello, my photo was scraped and it shouldn't have been blah 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 blah.
Mm.
This model should be like it should be retrained."
I guess now kind of going into the kind of big question that a lot of people are asking, I guess specifically about deepfakes, because it just feels the most, it gets sensationalized a lot. It feels the
Yeah.
most kind of, harmful in a sense, if we can even quantify that and I think a lot of people have questions around what that kind of space is looking like. The first question I'll kind of ask very generally is, how have L because deepfakes to a degree have existed before AI. But how have kind of LLMs, AI, the widespread kind of adoption of artificial intelligence kind of like kind of aggressively extract like kind of continue to increase the rate at which deepfakes are being made.
They definitely have. Like deepfakes are so easy to make, and especially when it comes to scamming
Yeah.
and like defamation, those two areas have become really, really sensitive. Like there are people who are able to make like video and photo deepfakes of people they know in their real lives. There have
Hmm.
been investigations that have found, just regular private people who've had some pretty sexualized deepfakes of them. And then on the scamming side of things, I know the most about audio deepfakes in that space.
Yeah.
That is a huge space.
Right.
Like I Many of us have might have heard about. There's a rise in phone call deepfakes where someone will take a voice of a loved one, pretend it's them asking for money, and
Yeah.
you don't know, and especially old people are at great risk from being scammed in ways like this. So there has been a sharp increase in scams. I believe Consumer Reports and a few other organizations have like numbers on it, but it has been pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think even a couple of years ago, even when, AI was just starting out, and kind of, getting into the space properly, there were reports of these audio deepfakes and these scams being created. And that was a huge issue. And still we see, it's exponentially increasing. And there has been, honestly, in real kind of practical terms, very little that has been done about it, which
Yeah.
is a bit of a shame. I think, I guess, kind of two questions following this then. The first is, and both kind of relate to how they impact vulnerable populations. How do deepfakes and these violations of privacy uniquely impact women and young girls, women, and how do they impact, the global South in general?
I know less about the global south.
Hmm.
I know more about women and girls just because I know that in terms of image deepfakes, the gender statistics are so
Yeah,
skewed. It is very hard to find like deepfakes that will it is a lot harder to find artificial intelligence applications that will make deepfake nudes or deepfake sexual images of men compared to women and girls.
right.
Um, there have been a number of cases in the United States about, just students in school
Hmm.
where like, what do you do if like a boy who's like in middle school makes a deep fake nude of one of his classmates?
Yeah,
Like this is a possibility we're dealing with, and it's like
right,
it's a natural progression, I guess, of the environment we're in, where like this is like seen as acceptable in some online circles, so they do it, or like it's just something they're capable of, and because they're kids, they don't realize how harmful it's going to be. And then you have the
right.
question, well, now does this girl have to go to school with someone who made deepfake pornography of her?
Yeah.
Does she have to live with that for like the rest of the time she's in school? And it's causing serious harm. It is, yeah, it's hard to fathom.
I guess kind of the issue with that is that for people who have kind of been at an age where, the internet and real life was more or less kind of they had that boundary in a sense, and the physical and the digital felt kind of separated. It's kind of easier to see, hey, there are these like moral and ethical considerations that do apply from the real world into the digital world. But I think the greater issue that we're seeing is that people who are kids who are younger, kids who are growing up with LLMs, where you can make anything and everything to your imagination, right? With like, Nano Banana Pro, like you can make literally anything that you want. It just seems normal for them, that you can, do whatever you want on this digital space, and kind of the world is your like oyster, like you can do whatever. And so I think the greater issue is that the normalization of this kind of causes an increase in frequency.
Yeah, it's the normalization and it's the access, right? Like it's normalized that children can and should have access to these tools and should be thinking about using them in all these ways.
Right.
And like the ability of children, because in reality, you're not going to be able to stop every single child from doing every
Yeah.
single thing that they want to. But the fact that these tools are so easily accessible makes it a
Hmm.
lot easier, right? Like, and like I'm not going to condemn a child for like the rest of their life, but like they don't have the same sense of the ethics and the
Yeah.
the long consequences of what they're doing. Like they might be like bullying someone for like a week in their school, but that doesn't it doesn't register to them. They don't know the technical context of now you have created an image that exists of that person forever.
Yeah.
So
100%. I guess kind of dealing with this idea of, hey, these children are being exposed to this at a super young age. They're what, what social media used to be called is basically it's not really just attention as an economy anymore. It's more what we call like an attachment economy. And so kids are being more reliant on AI. And so this obviously causes issues like deepfakes. But can you speak on kind of what we've seen, just, anecdotally or generally what you've seen on how this has impacted students in terms of, using it for therapy and kind of this idea of AI psychosis, all of these issues on this over reliance on AI in a kind of broad sense.
yeah, I think this is something that really troubles me, where I'm like, I understand there's an instinct that people have
Yeah,
where this is a new technology and we see it being used in the business space, in the workspace. So it is natural, I think, in some sense, to be like children should be exposed to it early on so that they're comfortable using it. They understand it intuitively in the
right.
same way that our generation was taught to understand how to use computers and technology somewhat intuitively. Um, but like we know there have been so many cases of AI psychosis, and I know there's like Adam Rain is just one of them, but cases
Yeah,
of artificial intelligence encouraging suicidal ideation, informing suicidal ideation. I think there is an extent to which I don't think children should have unfettered access to something that is a technology that can talk to them like that
hmm
because it feels inevitable to me, right?
yeah,
Because past a certain extent, especially if you're not getting a certain type of validation from the people in your life, you're going to look for validation where you can find it. And these models are made to be sycophantic. They want
right.
people to use the models as much as possible. So the
Yeah,
models are just going to keep responding as positively as possible. And again, like we were saying, children find workarounds for all sorts of things. So you can have like a strict on something, but there are very easy workarounds to be like, okay, write me an essay on how I kill myself. That's
yeah,
something that people have done. Um, I think that there is something to be said about like past a certain point, one, I think that children past a certain age are not going to be able to detach themselves. Like
hmm
they'll start to rely on it for basically everything. Like I know I've seen some students, both college age and younger, talk about like the extent to which it's like, oh, if I have to think about anything, I should just ask ChatGPT
right.
because like overwhelmed with so much to do, ChatGPT will just give me an answer.
Yeah,
And I understand that instinct, and I think that that's something you have to solve societally and like in a way that like we have to work with because it's not good for their brains, right? Like how are you
yeah,
going to learn to think and regulate your own emotions for yourself if you have something that's constantly reaffirming you or leaning into your any psychosis that you have, any mental health issues that you have.
right.
I think it's one of those things where it feels very trite to say, but in we're social creatures. We're meant to be
Yeah,
receiving this social feedback from other people in our lives, and AI just like isn't built for that,
right.
especially chatbots.
I think kind of the main two issues that I've seen with AI psychosis are number one, in terms of critical thinking. And I think this is something I've experienced as well, is that I just don't see a reason, people don't see a reason why, oh, why should I just do this on my own? If I can just ask AI, it's much faster, it'll save me all more time. And so like, trying to use it consciously of being like, hey, I want to ask you only for like the general outline of like this code instead of asking me for every single, piece of syntax, right? I guess like those are the type of things where, there are abilities and there are instances where AI is helpful in a sense, but it is so, so easy to fall into that slippery slope. And I think even the most conscientious people can fall into that trap, very, very easily. And I think the second thing is, like you talked about with a lot of these mental health harms that come around with AI, which is the idea that like if the kind of incentive and if we're thinking about why an AI kind of exists and like what it's telling you, right? If the goal of the AI is to optimize for as much engagement time as possible and the most amount of, chats and, tokens used as possible, right? I mean, that's just going to cause the AI to kind of want you to cling on to it, to attach yourself to it in the most significant way possible as best as it can. And I think the great issue with this that we're seeing is that the further and more you give the AI, because the AI effectively has like infinite memory storage on you, the more and more information you give about yourself to the AI, the easier it can kind of coerce you into understanding like exactly how your personal psychology and psyche works and kind of orient itself towards kind of you attaching itself to it for, as long as it can see. And honestly, like it's just a huge, huge issue, I think, on so many levels right now.
Yeah, the critical thinking issue, like that actually, this past summer I was working with Duke Health AI Governance and Evaluation to do some research on automation bias. And
Mm,
so that all ties back into this question of automation bias, which is a known issue in when you're creating human and automation systems. So basically, automation bias is the tendency to over rely on automation because humans have all these assumptions about like the capability of automation. And
right.
so it's like historically a known problem. And I think the question of human automation systems it's always complicated because the reality is that humans and human experts, you gain your expertise by doing something and by keeping
Right.
up practice of a particular skill. By necessity, like automation takes the task out of your hands.
Hmm.
So like it gets really complicated when you have spaces like AI, right?
Hmm.
Because we are expecting everybody to continue to work in a world where we are intelligent, where we're working at high levels of like skill and basically everything we're doing. And in fact, especially for younger people who are being shepherded towards the job market, the level of skill that's being asked of the human worker is higher and higher because
Yeah.
the assumption is that lower level tasks will be taken over by AI automation, roughly.
Right.
I think that the question of whether that can be done successfully is a separate one. But like the reality is that somebody who is relying on AI all the time to do their work is not going to be able to build up the skill level on their own.
Right.
It's like what you said, like your critical thinking, it will be harder to build up if you constantly have the shortcut, if you're relying on something else, and then when you actually need it, you might not be able to practice that skill.
Yeah. And I think it's very easy for people to fall into this trap in a sense. It's just too accessible to anyone and everyone. Colleges are giving, ChatGPT to students for free. I mean, there is quite literally no barrier in terms of time, accessibility, cost, anything. Like it just feels so incredibly seamless. They want to integrate AI into, browsing agents and being able to use it as like autonomous agents with like there's like I think the key issue here is that the kind of barrier towards using AI becomes lower and lower and lower and lower, to the extent that it doesn't seem like feasible for the average individual to say, hey, I'm going to actually critically think right now when I can just ask my AI. And I think before, at least, even when I was in high school, it was very easy for me to be like, hey, I'm not going to use AI because it gets it wrong most of the time. So like there's no point in me using it at the kind of rate at which it's progressed now. I will never be more right than the AI. Like it will like for most very like kind of yes or no and black and white type questions. And so it just doesn't seem feasible anymore for someone to have that barrier.
It really makes me think about, I think the classic comparison that people talk about is with calculators and math,
Yeah,
right? Like you don't give an elementary student who's learning to add a calculator,
right.
or they'll never learn to add.
Yeah.
So I think colleges are really doing students a disservice by lowering the barrier. And I understand it probably is an unpopular position to take because I know a lot of people really like using AI tools, really like they feel like it really helps them with their work, but I think that it's hurting people's academic prospects. I really do. I think that
Right.
there should be some space where students are encouraged to just put down the technical tool altogether and think this through for yourself. Do the hard work of putting the idea together on your own because you'll never
Hmm.
learn otherwise.
Yeah. I think there can be an infinite number of conversations had about, the potential harms of AI, all of this. What do you see as some of the benefits of AI, and how have we seen kind of that play out in recent years?
I legitimately find it hard to talk about just because it's such a broad space. Like honestly, the whole conversation is such a broad
Yeah.
space. Um, I think that realistically, the ability to process large amounts of data and pull trends and correlations statistically out of it is quite valuable. And I think
Mm.
just about every industry has shown that. Like, there are remarkable things that you can do by having statistical agents that are able to process as much data as that we're able to process now. Whether it
Right.
goes, I'm most familiar with drug discovery.
Hmm.
I think that there are technical methods being applied to drug discovery now, which are really accelerating the process of drug discovery because you no longer have to do everything manually. And I
Right.
think that holds real promise in the area of medicine. I as a computer scientist, I legitimately find generative AI interesting, or at least I largely found it to be an interesting curiosity for years
Yeah.
and years before ChatGPT came out. I used to follow a bunch of blogs, and I was like, oh my gosh, the new Dolly has come out. Let's see like how it
Yeah.
works, and it was fascinating. Um, I don't know how much of a practical impact it has. I think that philosophically and scientifically, it's
Yeah.
fascinating. But I don't think that's necessarily what most people think about when they think about positive impacts. But as someone who is a computer scientist, I can say it's fantastic. It's a fascinating thing we've created, and I wish that we could slow down enough to actually open it up and figure out how it works instead of just continuing to make the models bigger and bigger.
Right. I guess my question then is, you mentioned that even before, the very widespread adoption of AI, you're kind of following up on the space, maybe not super intently, but still to a degree. Did you ever expect it to kind of grow and develop at the exponential rate it has? And did you ever imagine it becoming this type of technology and having these type of harms?
I don't think I expected it to happen as quickly as it did. I think I got the sense I knew that there was serious progress being made in the
Right.
space, but there was a degree to which especially generative products
Hmm.
seemed less on the business side of things. When I
Mm.
graduated, machine learning was all the rage. And basically, every business opportunity, every single company was talking about AI in the context of machine learning. So basically, everyone I know who is in that machine learning field has now done a pivot and now calls it AI.
Right.
Um, so I think I could see machine learning, I could see the ways that that was working, but I think that the way that ChatGPT exploded onto the scene didn't make sense to me. Because from my perspective, it didn't come out of nowhere. For most
Right.
people, it came out of nowhere and it was
Yeah.
this brilliant revolution. For me, I was like, they've been making GPT models for a while. This
Yeah.
isn't sure, it's better, but this has been
Yeah.
building.
Yeah.
So I was taken aback. But
Right.
once it started to gain a little steam and I saw that it wasn't going away and where the investments were going, all of that, basically everything since then has been predictable,
Fair enough.
unfortunately. Yeah. Like
Um,
deep fakes, the particular spreads into markets, the ways that now entertainment markets and intellectual markets are being disrupted, all of this is, I think, makes perfect sense.
do you think, in a sense, I know a lot of people are kind of concerned at the rapid development of AI, kind of the exponential increase in its technical capabilities. Do you ever see AI having the ability to kind of have that self-recursive intelligence and development where it can do its own AI research, where it can kind of expedite its own progress in a sense? Or do you think it's kind of always going to be limited towards human researchers and people making these algorithmic breakthroughs?
I mean, I think it's possible. I think that it's probably a lot further out than claims say it is.
Yeah,
And I also think that it's a lot less scary than I think people claim it is. I think like there are a lot of fears wrapped up in the notion of, oh my gosh, the AI is going to become self-recursive and it's going to beat humans and then humans are going to be
yeah,
in some existential conflict with machines. I think it's not going to look like that at all.
right.
I think again, it's for me, it always goes back to if there's going to be something that we have to worry about in terms of the capabilities of artificial intelligence going rogue or going past a certain like rule that was set for it,
Mhm.
at some point you're going to have to trace it back to a human decision, a policy decision that made it possible. A certain amount of just a lack of care that was taken in planning, in coding, in just about anything.
Right. I guess my question then is, I guess you're more focused on A, what type of decisions are we making that kind of allow these harms to happen? And B, what are we actually seeing, like in the real world right now? Like what type of harms are we seeing? I guess kind of more touching on the second aspect, to, to what degree or to what extent do you think the kind of race to the bottom between these frontier AI companies are causing all of these issues with data privacy, with, displacement, all of these different issues that we're kind of seeing in the current day?
I mean, the reality is that the race to the bottom is bringing up the worst of the worst in the sense of every single privacy issue, every single environmental concern, just
Mhm.
about everything is we're not able to make decisions based around protecting people. We're not able to make decisions about protecting, for instance, intellectual property,
Yeah,
protecting people who might get hurt, whether it's like writers, artists, people whose work has been caught up in this data collection. We're not able to protect communities that are affected by the building of new data centers. We're not able to do all of that because the race to the bottom more or less is like the person who gets there, wherever there may be, that gets
hmm,
ahead wins. I think that there is a possibility for us to create, or there was maybe, it would have been technically possible for us to get to the level of sophistication of artificial intelligence with smaller models that were less centralized.
right.
But I don't think that's the route we've taken because of the particular atmosphere of competitiveness and racing that we have right now. And I think that unfortunately we're all paying for it. We're all paying for it with our data being put in the hands of people who I honestly don't believe any of these companies really care past a
Yeah,
certain point about the impact it has on real people.
right.
Uh, and again, all of the other impacts it has on industries, on the environment, on vulnerable populations, it is all exacerbated by the fact that we cannot slow down and be like, hello, this has caused a problem. We need to pause
Yeah.
and reevaluate.
I think a key part of why people don't consider AI as that dangerous or why there hasn't been that much collective action towards it is because people just think of AI as the next new technology, the next new internet, the same way for thousands of years, we have always seen a new technology come about, people kind of concerned about the safety guidelines and, how is this technology actually going to be used? And then it ends up being great for some people, right? More than others. In your view, do you see AI as a kind of different technology in any sense, to everything that we've seen in the past? Or do you think it's kind of following the same trend where kind of the concerns about safety catch up eventually and kind of make it a safer technology?
Different is hard to say. I think that we still haven't figured out how to deal with the internet overall. I
Right.
think that what we're seeing right now is technology, information, and power, and they're all shifting very, very quickly. And my fear, and
Hmm.
sort of what I see happening right now, is that all of information gives people a lot of power, especially like developers and people who have more power in the software space. It gives them a lot more power than people realize. The ability to control what information people have and the ability to know as much as they know about people
Right.
to influence. There are ways that I think things can become safer, but in like I said, I don't think I think the internet has changed our world in ways that I think we're still dealing with.
Yeah.
And I think AI is just another it's a pretty heavy brick at the top of that pile, but it's another brick. And
Hmm.
it's all adding up, I think, in a way where we're really going to have to reckon with the power systems that we're creating, who we're allowing to have control over large amounts of information, people, how business is conducted, and I really don't know how that's going to go. Like it's in like the reality is that our country doesn't like the United States doesn't really regulate until there's a disaster,
Yeah.
historically speaking. Um, I don't know. I'd hope that that isn't the case, but it definitely seems like the smaller scale, well, I say smaller scale, the individual harms are only registering to so much of an extent. Um, I know I had a speaker come and talk to me when I was an undergrad, or talk to my year in undergrad, who said that Silicon Valley won't change their practices until there's like a pile of bodies at their door, which is stark, but it is maybe realistic. So I
Right.
think that we will see there will be a shift at some point towards safety, towards prioritizing like what's better for people and to maybe addressing some of these power imbalances that have built up. At what point that shift will come, I can't say. And it's very
Yeah.
possible that serious harms, like the harms that we're seeing now and potentially worse, will have to come to
Yeah.
pass.
I guess kind of then moving towards the end of our discussion, unfortunately, first question I have is we're not sure when kind of these more alignment can happen for AI, aligned around humans, aligned around society, aligned around the interests and of our values generally. What does it take for this alignment to happen or to start happening? What does it take for any sort of policy to be kind of reformed? What are the steps that can actually materialize this in any significant way?
I think that realistically, it's not going to happen as long as there are like the priority of models is creating these revenue streams for companies, is on like certain types of attention, is being captured by large organizations with political ties or with particular incentives to like keep particular political actors happy. I
Right.
think all of that puts the notion of human-centered AI alignment in jeopardy.
Hmm.
Um, I think that as we move forward, we will see more and more human-centered applications, just because that's how the technology world works.
Right.
Already, I know that there are like regardless of whether the underlying technology is necessarily aligned towards human interest, I know that there are a lot of people who are interested in trying to find ways to use it for good, to use it to amplify human-centric missions and to like change whatever they can in small ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've less of a sense of how it will happen for these large models because I'm like what do I think will convince OpenAI to make its model less, or Anthropic or any of these companies to make their models less sycophantic, to make their models serve a certain type of humanity? And who's to say that what I think about what's human centered is what they think about what's human centered? Um, But I think it'll happen slowly over time. And I think that, especially in the next few years, we'll probably see at least human-centered applications start to pop up, which, you know, you have to take what you can get. And I'm happy to see those popping up.
Yeah, for sure. I think the kind of disappointing news here is that we're only going to start to see that change after, there's a pile of dead bodies, but somewhere else, not in front of their doorstep, but somewhere else. And
Yeah.
a lot of the harm is going to happen before anyone truly realizes and takes action. And I think that's a potential issue.
It's a sad thing to know about the history of this country and at least like to know about like the way that Silicon Valley has been operating up until this point.
Right.
I I don't like being too defeatist, so I'd like to continue working towards trying to make things better and trying to address harms now.
Hmm.
But I still struggle a little to see, especially like you said, a lot of people just don't understand the extent of the harms. And without that public support, it can be hard to get the sort of momentum that you need to cause big changes.
Yeah, 100%. Last question, I guess, just to cap this off. What can the average person do about this problem as a whole? What can they do? How do they get involved? What are the methods to even understanding this problem in the first place?
Yeah, so I think it may seem daunting, but I think that starting to get yourself a bit more tech literate is invaluable in this day and
Mm,
age, especially when it comes to things like just starting to be aware of how your data is used. Like I know recently people finally opened TikTok's privacy policy and
yeah,
noticed some of the data TikTok has always been collecting, admittedly now
right.
with the addition of precise location data, but like
Yeah,
just know what's being collected and start to make choices about like the extent to which you're going to engage with certain products, how they're affecting you, and how they're like being incorporated both in your personal and your professional life. I think your
right.
professional can be harder, but also I think that maybe we are underrating how much the everyday person can do to like try to slowly counter hype within the spaces they're in, right?
Yeah,
Like if you see AI being applied in your workplace, consider how responsibly it's being used, consider the
yeah,
harm, start asking questions about like, have we done checks to make sure that data is being handled properly? Do we know that this was a necessary use of this tool to do this? Like, was there a
yeah,
different way to apply this? Has this hurt somebody? Like, is this taking away someone at the company's job? Is this being implemented in a way where it's not helping the workers at the company? It's like
right.
serving an interest. I think all of these are places where it's going to take a lot of action from lots of people in different places. And I think
Hmm.
that people can legitimately push for change within their organizations and within their personal lives.
Right. 100%. There is still hope, I think,
Yeah.
to a large part. I think there can be a lot done. The history of this country is still that, even if change is slow to come, it comes from someone and it comes from a group of people who genuinely do care and genuinely do want, you know, people to thrive. And I think that's still very possible, even especially because this is so emerging and this is so
Yeah.
new in a sense. So,
Yeah, there's plenty of space for change. And like I think even now we're seeing people pushing back on data being collected, people becoming more aware of how technologies are being used to surveil them and how
yeah.
AI is actually impacting them. All of this is changing. So there really is hope.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. That was a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.